As a leader in the grief space, I've cared for and supported families and communities for over 20 years. This show dives into the journey and experiences all of us will most certainly encounter in life. Welcome to the Guiding Grief podcast, where we discuss grief and explore opportunities for growth and connection. I'm your host, Nicholas Welzenbach, and this is Guiding Grief on KCAT TV. Welcome back to the Guiding Grief podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Welzenbach. We are so privileged today to be sitting with Lisa Pahl. She is a licensed clinical social worker, hospice worker, and the co-creator of the Death Deck. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being with us today. Look forward to finding out all about how you co-created the Death Deck, the impact it's had on your career and your space. And I just really like to start off with thank you for being here, and then asking you, how did you get into hospice and social work, and what was the draw to find a space typically ridden with grief and difficult topics to help and guide families through?
Well, I'm very excited to be here today. I began working in hospice about 18 years ago now. I had worked in community mental health and with survivors of torture, domestic violence, rape crisis early on in my career. And as you might imagine, most social work jobs have a little bit of depressingness to it.
Absolutely.
Because we tend to help people through difficult times. And I was working in Los Angeles for about 6 years in community mental health, working with primarily kids involved in gangs in East LA. And 2 of my clients were murdered. And I took a step back and said, I don't think I can do this anymore. And so my work in hospice came from kind of a burnout out of another community mental health position. And I was really interested in working in the home space, though, because I had seen in these with my work with survivors of torture and my work with community mental health families, that the home is where you can really get to know what's going on for a person and their family. So I kind of stumbled into hospice. I said, what can I do as a social worker in people's homes? And within 2 weeks of working in hospice, I said, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to dedicate my life to. But when I think back, my dad was diagnosed with leukemia when I was 18. And I'll fast forward and say he's alive at 71. So we can all breathe easy.
Doing great.
Doing great. He runs 10 miles a week. He's healthier than me.
Wow.
So he's doing really well. But at that time, as an 18-year-old, I didn't know how to handle the situation, and I avoided it. He was really sick. He was in the hospital, and I avoided it. And years later, I began thinking about this. As I was starting my hospice career, I was thinking, why did I shy away from that? And so I think there was even an element of a do-over for me, where I got to show up differently for people who are facing serious illness.
And help them lean in. Yeah.
And the beautiful thing about what happened with my dad is that he went from being someone who was very focused on work, very focused on our work as a family, because we grew up on a farm. And once he was diagnosed, he really faced his mortality, and he said, there's more to life than this. And he began having these really meaningful conversations with my brother and I. When my son was born, he called every single day until he was 3. And I would put my phone up to my baby's ear so he could hear my dad's voice. And so I also saw that when we reflect on mortality, when we are embracing the fact that our time is limited, we can have more meaningful relationships, and we can live intentionally with that.
He's exposed to that vulnerability and was definitely willing to share that just by spending time. I mentioned that earlier to you today, that I believe that closeness is a matter of effort, not proximity. And you're from Michigan, so Michigan to LA is definitely a phone call and not a pop-in.
Yeah. and now a Zoom
and
or
now
a FaceTime.
Yeah, they can be
Yeah.
ever present.
Yeah.
My family's also far away, so we've harnessed all of those things long before the pandemic to make sure that grandparents are engaged in our kids' lives.
Mm-hmm.
When you got into hospice, I mean, there has to have been an arc and a journey. When did the death deck and the EOL deck, the end of life deck, how long into your career did this idea come? And then we can get into what it is, to the tool that it's become.
Mm-hmm. So it was only a few years into my hospice career that I met my now business partner, Lori. I was the hospice social worker for her husband, Joe. He was on service with us for just a couple weeks, and he died in his early 40s of pancreatic cancer. During my time supporting Lori while he was dying and then in grief, we began having all these conversations about how she was second-guessing some of the decisions she made on behalf of Joe. They had done a lot of paperwork preparation just in case.
Yeah.
But once he was diagnosed, they found it pretty impossible to try to think about the fact that he might die, and so there weren't really any conversations that happened. And so over time, Lori and I reconnected years later and began talking about how it came to be that she was now living with a grief in which she was questioning if she had done the right things by Joe. And so we decided, well, what can we do? What can we do about it? You know, I think a lot of times we find ourselves seeing situations and acknowledging that there's a problem, but we don't know how to do anything about it. And so we began kind of brainstorming and thinking about, well, what if we could make something that was kind of fun and help people begin these conversations long before a medical diagnosis or crisis.
Right, like
And
triaging her own grief by making sure that she could maybe help others, both of you help others through what you do on a daily basis and what she experienced with Joe.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
you'd mentioned that he was like the paperwork ready. Can you qualify? Because I know what you mean, but for listeners, what does that mean versus, you know, being ready to make decisions for end of life?
Well, paperwork ready in this situation, I would say they had an advance directive. They had gone to an attorney and created a living trust. They had life insurance policy. And so they had done all these things when they were starting a family, thinking this is the responsible thing to do. But like many of us, it's something, you and I were looking at our notes app earlier, right? You check it off.
Yep.
It's done.
Yeah, we did
Don't
those
have
things.
to think about that again. Woo! You know.
Yeah. And a pat on the back for being so far ahead.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
Those are great things to do.
And truthfully, Lori's grief experience would have been much worse had they not had some of those things
Right.
in place. And so this isn't to minimize that they had done some preparation, but it was more that they had done the paperwork, didn't really talk about what any of it meant, and didn't have any follow-up conversations about all the little details. So when it came to be that Lori was trying to decide, you know, how much, whether Joe would want to be sedated or more present as he was dying, whether he would want his extended family there or not, how involved he wanted the kids to be, you know, some of these big questions that she trusted her instincts, and her instincts were beautiful and good. Mm-hmm. And we supported her along the way as the hospice team. But what I've learned in working in this space, and I've also worked in the emergency room for 8 years, and it's really the conversations that give us confidence. When we can hear our loved one's voice in our ear, because usually when we talk about things related to end of life, we have strong feelings, mm-hmm. and these are not that common of conversations, and so we really remember them, and they're emotional, mm-hmm. and so they are imprinted a little bit stronger for us. So when families can recall those words and they can say, oh, I remember, Dad told me he never wants a feeding tube, and he didn't care what happened, no feeding tube.
Yeah.
And when, a simple statement like that, if family members hear that, then a situation arises and they say, yeah, Dad said, he was firm.
This helps to define part of the path.
Exactly.
Immediately.
Exactly. So we decided that, there's tools out there for people to have these conversations, but none of them were very fun.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get people to talk about death and dying. It's hard to get people to talk about things that are hard. Death, sex, taxes. These are hard topics.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to kind of make it a little playful.
And we know, though, based on the novelty of our space, and when we're in, we've shared with one another based on you living down in Los Angeles and me up here in the Silicon Valley, that whenever we find ourselves in a space, those difficult conversations in a room where you're sitting around sharing a cocktail or having a conversation, people are always kind of wanting to know what it is you do and how you support people, or what it is in my profession, how we support people. And then as soon as it gets opened up in those types of settings, right, it goes through, I don't want to talk about this, do I have an opinion about everything? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And that's one of the great parts about the Death Deck, is that it opens it up. So there's kind of a guided way to go through it so you can have those conversations. But I just love the impact that it can have for hospice and for social workers in that space, to make sure that they're armed with something to go in. And I think you mentioned it as kind of a prop between you and a patient, or you and a patient and their family. All of a sudden there's a way for you to say, hey, let's bring some lightness to this, and then ask some questions. But how many questions are in the Death Deck?
Yeah. So when we think about my work as a hospice social worker, I'm mostly using our second product, the EOL Deck.
Right.
Yeah. The EOL Deck, End of Life Deck, is one that is a little bit more respectful, a little bit more sensitive, because we're wanting to help people who are approaching end of life have these conversations. So how I look at it is, if death seems far away, because we never really know, but if it seems far away, then the Death Deck is the tool that I use with people. I do a lot of community education, community events. I take it to the wine bar, I take it to the brewery, I take it to the restaurant. I'm randomly asking people questions all the time to stimulate these conversations. And then our EOL Deck is the tool that I use as a hospice social worker that can be really helpful, because I have this card in front of me, and it becomes that the card is asking the question instead of me, and that kind of reduces the vulnerability, and it also makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, because I have that prop,
And if you're comfortable and confident, then they're comfortable and confident.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, even working in this space, it can be hard to talk about the fact that this person is dying. Oftentimes in hospice, we focus on symptom management, which is very important. If someone's pain is not managed, they can't have these conversations anyway. So a lot of our efforts are on symptom management, but we sometimes lose the big picture. And families and patients, they don't have experience talking about this either. Right. And in a lot of ways, they look to us to help them have these conversations, even though they might be reluctant to do so. And I think especially as people are somewhat new in the field, or just don't have the confidence, it can be really scary even. Yeah. You're afraid of how the family's going to respond, even though for someone to be on hospice, they have a 6 months or less diagnosis. Yeah. And we expect that they will be dying within that time. And yet it's still often not talked about.
There's still taboo.
It's still taboo to talk about it
inside that home or inside that hospital. And you're like, wait, how can I help you?
This is the time.
Yeah.
This is the time. I mean, the time is really all of our lives. We should, having these conversations, I think it really, having conversations about death and dying, it does take practice. You know, when you first began as a funeral director or working at a mortuary, I'm sure that every day was a little bit scary.
100% out of my comfort zone.
Yes.
Yeah. I like the fact that I still find myself there, right? It keeps me on my toes. But yes, there's a lot more knowledge I have today, and I'm sure for you as well. Mm-hmm. I know we're going to come up against time, and we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to hear from our sponsors. We are sitting with Lisa Pahl. This is Guiding Grief. I'm Nicholas Welzenbach, and stay tuned after the break as we're going to get into a little bit of the EOL deck, the end of life deck, and we're going to answer some of those questions, and I'm going to be in that hot seat.
Excellent. I look
Stay
forward
tuned.
to it.
I'd like to take an opportunity and pause just to thank our sponsors, Darling Fischer and Los Gatos Memorial Park, celebrating lives one story at a time. As members of the community here in Campbell, San Jose, and Los Gatos, it has been an honor to care for so many of the loved ones of our community, and we are so grateful for your trust. That's why we're supporting this podcast, Guiding Grief, and bringing your community information about how to heal. Welcome back to the Guiding Grief podcast. We're sitting here with Lisa Pahl as we're going to continue our conversation about the death deck and the end of life deck. And right now we're going to dive into some of those questions, the value they present as it relates to that in advance, right? The death deck questions, what they can do to create. I mean, if anyone's ever talking about the weather, especially if you're at one of the bars or restaurants, this has to be a better way to engage, because it's far better to talk about something of substance than about whether or not it's going to rain and something we have no control over. Mm-hmm. This is the death deck. I found out about it quite some time ago and reached out to Lisa. I'm so excited that she's here on the podcast. You can find these at thedeathdeck.com. And I know that I've sat around with my family. We've sat around with our staff at Darling Fischer and Los Gatos Memorial Park, and we've asked these questions. And even for us in the death care space and funeral and cemetery, these are great conversations for us. So I'm looking forward to, because I don't know which cards you have.
No, you don't.
Answering some of these questions, as I think I know what I want.
Yeah.
But I'm not 100% sure.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with one that's just kind of your thoughts on a topic.
One of the open-ended.
No.
Okay.
I'm going to give you choices. This is
okay.
multiple choice.
All right.
So.
All right. I can.
So don't stress.
And there is no wrong answer.
There's no wrong answer.
Okay. This is terrific.
Now, I will say that another way to play, which is my favorite, is partnering up and guessing each other's answers, because it adds a fun.
A very like wedding game kind of thing. Like, do
newlywed.
I know what
Yep.
I think? Newlywed.
Do you know your spouse?
Yes. Do you know your spouse?
Which it turns out most people don't.
Absolutely not. Which is an awesome reason to play this game.
Yes.
I know from my profession, when someone sits with us on a couch in one of our living rooms, we're having conversations, making plans, and they go, "I've never had this conversation." So wouldn't this taboo topic be better conquered in a lively space when we're ready for a little bit of vulnerability before we're completely and totally exposed?
Right. And your thoughts and feelings may change, as we age, as situations happen. It's always going to evolve, but at least you have some comfort with the topic, and at least you have a starting place.
Yeah.
Well, you said last year that this is what you wanted. Well, yeah, but that was before I went to that funeral where I saw this thing, and now I want this, know. So it's an ongoing conversation.
Right.
Yeah. So this first question is, signs from beyond the grave are A, a comforting validation that souls live on. B, probably just a coincidence, I think, maybe. Or C, not real. Once you're gone, there's no way to phone home.
Okay. I know what I believe is C.
Uh-huh.
And I know what I prefer, as I have all of my encounters, and every single time a song comes on the radio, that I prefer A. I think it's a better space. I think I exist in C, but I love all of the signs as it relates to connections. So I don't know if that's the right, or if that's even a valid offer. That's not wrong. Okay.
There's no right or wrong. And, I would say I started working in a hospice as a C. I moved to a B, and now I exist between the B and A.
Okay.
But it's been a progression, and some of that is from my own grief experiences. And I do think there's an element for me that sounds similar to how you're feeling, where I think at times I choose to believe.
Yeah.
And that.
Or I just needed it right now.
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it's like all the justification for the tears that you would experience based on that person was here with me today, the butterfly landed, or the song came on the radio. Hopefully it's not something spooking you in your house or something like that, but it is, a sign that I that C perspective is, if it happened, I want to believe that it was a connection. I don't know that I do, but I'm really, really always grateful for it. Nevertheless, I really appreciate that reminder. And I think it was because my brain usually is longing for that connection. Oh gosh, great question.
Yeah. When my father-in-law died, he died suddenly, and my family, we flew home to be with my mother-in-law and to sort everything out. And that night, the first night we were there, I had this dream, and in the dream, the house was just filled with trash. Like it was my husband's family home, and it was just filled with pizza boxes and just garbage. And in the dream, I was so stressed, and I was just like, what are we going to do? How are we going to clean this up? And all of a sudden, my father-in-law was sitting there, and he said, Lisa, don't worry. It's all taken care of. And I turned back around, and the house was spotless. And he said, and by the way, I didn't know that I was going to die. I didn't know I was sick. And so the next morning, I woke up to that. Now, is this a sign? Is this my subconscious trying to work through things?
Right.
What is this? Who knows? But I woke up and I shared this with my mother-in-law, and she wept because she thought that maybe Gary was keeping how bad he felt. He died of heart failure, and he just seemed tired, And so she had all these questions, and so it was so comforting to her. And I'll never know whether he visited me or, who's to say, but that shifted. That brought me to a B to an A.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, I don't know. But this is what I love about these type of conversations is that there's so much richness and connections that we have with people when we can talk about such meaningful things.
Everyone has a story, and no one asks the question.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you're going to be talking about, if it's my wife Kendall and I talking about us, we're usually doing it from reflection of past experience. So it's exposing something that maybe you didn't get to talk about or share, and then allowing you to shed light on it for the future. And this is how I'd like to do it different. I mean, which is how you guys got here in the first place, right? Like, hey, in hindsight, 2020, would we have done it different? I'm not sure. We can't change it, but maybe we could help others. I'm ready for question number 2.
Okay. And the last thing I'll say on that topic is that grief needs to be shared. And so usually these conversations turn into grief conversations because everyone has grief and everyone has a story.
Yes.
And we're just so eager to talk about the people that we love that aren't with us. And we, I'm always, if any opportunity comes up to talk about my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my grandma, my friend, all these people who have passed, I just, can I tell you about it?
Yeah. Because if you don't tell their story, who will?
Yeah.
Right? Or your experience with them. That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, here's one that is more about your wishes. Making a video of yourself to be played after you have died is A, on my to-do list, B, something I would only consider if I was terminally ill or getting up in years, or C, creepy, sad, and downright depressing.
Okay, definitely not C.
Okay. Well, given that we're
so
making a video of us talking about this topic.
I love the idea, especially in the waning years of life, that there would be a message left. So I don't know that at 43 that I'm recording that message now, but tomorrow's not promised, so maybe I should anyway. I remember this movie, The Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, was all about that, was about recording messages. Gosh, it was not a very good movie, but I definitely loved it. So don't need to rush out to watch Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. I don't think you'll be disappointed, but it was Anyway, but it is about that. So I've actually had that thought since that came out in the 90s. I think I'd like for my kids to have a message. I love the fact that every single time that we have a video that we play for a family and a memorial service, and they add a little video to it, and it's not even like them talking, it's just them enjoying life, a birthday party, blowing out candles. I just feel like it brings so much life to something that is, we're so worried about the absence, and just seeing that person live life, I think it's an awesome idea. So I don't know that I'm doing it right now, but I definitely would 100% be. How about you?
I have not done it yet. It is on my to-do list. I think I have written letters to my son. So every year I've been writing a letter to him on his birthday. And I hope that he will. It's like my wishes for him, as he grows up, and just where I'm at in terms of how I think about him. But in terms of the videos, I think that it keeps going back to this fact of, like, we don't really think we're gonna die, and my business partner Lori, she's actually made videos for her kids. So of course her husband did die, and so for her, she really wanted to make sure that her kids had these videos. When my mother-in-law was dying, she died of pancreatic cancer, just like Lori's husband Joe, and my grandma. But when Kay was dying, I had it on my to-do list that she would make videos and write letters.
Yeah.
And I ended up having to let go of my own agenda, because I kept thinking, oh, how meaningful this will be for us later. Yeah. Selfishly. Yeah. Please make these videos. And, and how it turned out was she just wanted to live in the moment. She just wanted to create all those memories with us now. She did let me record a video of her singing.
Oh.
And, oh my gosh, it is one of the most treasured things that I have now, is listening to her sing.
What did she sing?
And she's so bright. It was a Mary Poppins song.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
It was, and I watch it now, and she's just, to your point about the videos, they're alive again. She's alive, dancing around the room, singing this song as she's sick, but she is vibrant and she is alive, and I can remember it. And so now I realize that was better. Me recording her saying some kind of message.
Right. Maybe it would have been
that
contrived.
Was mine. That was.
Yeah. But that was an authentic experience.
But this was an authentic experience where she sang a song. Gosh. I said, can you do it one more time and I can record it? And she said, okay. So.
Gosh, that's awesome. I have a video of my brother Nate, who we lost, carrying our daughter Audrey. And he was just a big lumberjack of a man. And I have it, and like he comes in and out. I think we were filming something else, and he was just such a big character. What was that? I can't remember the name of the movie. There's a ride for it at Disneyland. Monsters Inc. Sully. Reminds me of Sully. Yeah. And he was carrying my little itty bitty baby girl, and I just love to see that video, because it just reminds me of just this like powerful, amazing, big, strong human being that was just soft as a teddy bear. And there's nothing being said in the video. I could just see him walk in and out of frame, holding like this the most precious thing in the world to us. And oh gosh, I haven't thought about that video. I now have to find that video. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked me this question.
Yeah.
I'll immediately send that to the entire family so we can all just weep respectively.
Well, and I rarely will tell my hospice families, take videos. We tend, at least in my life, there's a lot more pictures and selfies and, being taken. When I was growing up, we had one of those big camcorders, right?
Yeah.
My mom recorded everything, every Christmas morning, all these things on this giant thing. And I think we've, at least in my world, we've gotten away from doing as many. And now we're just, snapping pictures. And
we were here.
Or you're creating TikTok content, which is a different thing. But although I have talked to some death influencers who have their whole TikTok following who, I mean, they have a ton of videos that people will remember them forever for, and things like podcasts and all these things. These are our legacy and
living
how people
memories.
will remember us. But I encourage people to take. My 15-year-old gets so annoyed at me because I'm like, just a minute of a video that's, not him playing volleyball, just talking, existing, just him and his friends hanging out. Yeah.
Well,
I think we're out of time.
Yeah,
right?
we're getting close to the end, and I just want to remind everybody, like, just asking these two questions, right? There's 112 in here. I think you said there is 80 of them are kind of a multiple choice,
mm-hmm.
and then there's 20 some that are open-ended.
Mm-hmm.
There is none of these questions don't have an immense amount of value to a family, to a community. Just opening up, speaking about death, which is, it's coming for all of us. So if we could be better prepared. So I commend you for going out and having this endeavor, right? You could have just done nothing and said, well, I'll just continue to do what I do. But you created two different ways to engage hospice workers and social workers about helping families with grief, which is 100% noble and commendable. And I would just recommend, I've done it. We've answered a few of the questions here today, and those questions, those answers could change, right? It's an evolution. So go to thedeathdeck.com, order this game, right? It looks a lot like a Trivial Pursuit, and I've done it myself. It's a lot of fun to have this level of engagement and conversation. It's way better than talking about the weather or what might happen tomorrow as it relates to just day-to-day things. This is real. I am so grateful that you came up and spent time today with many of the members of our community and our hospice at Darling Fischer. It has been an honor to meet you in person. We are sitting here on Guiding Grief. This is Lisa Pahl, and we are so grateful for each and every one of our listeners today. So thank you so much. Have a great and wonderful day. Be good to one another, and please never stifle tears. That's the good stuff. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Guiding Grief podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Welzenbach. Grief is a profound experience, but you're not alone. Let's continue to navigate this journey together. If you have any thoughts, questions, or topics you'd like us to explore, reach out. Until next time, be kind to yourself, find strength in your resilience, and always hold on to hope. Before we end, I'd like to give a quick thank you to KCAT TV for producing our show. Please remember, be good to one another.